Steve, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
It's great to be with you, Ryan. Looking forward to talking.
Absolutely, and we just want to make sure that we're caught up to date with some of the college football rules that are going to be implemented for 2016, some change of some things, and just wanted to really get your opinion and help us better understand that. Let's start with centralized instant replay. It was something that you guys were ahead of the curve on, but just talk about what's going to be implemented for 2016, how this is going to change us.
Yeah, and as we talk through all the rule changes, I put a little asterisk out there to keep in mind. So the Rules Committee has approved all that we're going to talk about, but it still has to go through the Prop Committee, the Playing Rules Oversight Panel. That is in early March. So all of this is subject to that approval. So just have that as kind of a blanket statement as we talk through all of this. But you're exactly right. So there is it's really being looked at as an experimental rule for instant replay, and so what the experimental rule will allow is, today our rule book says that the instant replay official is located in the press box, and makes the decision. And so this really was a process that was started by our coaches last year in Destin, and their desire and want for a collaborative replay answer, and I think their view was, this guy sitting in the stadium, he's under the gun. We know TV's looking in the window. I mean, the clock's ticking, and there's a lot to process in a short period of time. And I think the coach's view was, having a collaborative approach would be helpful, because ultimately we just want to get it right. And so what the Rules Committee has allowed under an experimental exception is to allow conference to use a collaborative process, and they could have personnel in a separate secure location and able to assist the instant replay official in the stadium in making decisions. So
now, when we talk about central replays and talking about, now we have the SEC, like you're in charge of the officials. Are we making this where this would be more of a college football office that these replays would go back to, or are we going to keep that still within the conferences?
Well, initially the experimentation is within the conference. So any game that we had our conference instant replay officials in, then we would use a collaborative approach to make this. So it is still a conference, kind of process. I know a lot of people have kind of jumped exactly where you're going. Well, could this be ultimately a national replay center and all that? I don't know. I don't know where we go down the line with it. But what we really want to do, and certainly we're looking at the alternatives and what would be available to us. No final decision has been made yet. And certainly we need to make sure Prop gets us there. But I think we're looking at, from a technology perspective, if we did this, what would we have to do? How would we staff it? Where would it be? All those type things, to work through. And the other thing that I'll say right up front that, people have, said, first say, a lot of other sports have worked into this model, National Hockey League, NFL now, baseball, basketball. So a centralized process can clearly work, and so what we're trying to do is see if through collaboration, we're not going to remove the guy, from the replay booth in the stadium. Ultimately he'll still be the person, with that final call. He'll be the person hitting the button to stop the game. But what we want to do is just, look at all aspects of the play, and we really think two things. Number one, our correct rate will be higher, but also timing. The first question we got, well, will this slow it down? You got a central site, and actually we think it'll speed it up, because in this collaborative process, when you've got, say if we have 3 replay guys, in a central site looking at it, they can process all of the aspects of the play much quicker, and certainly, through that collaboration. Hey, look at his foot. Well, look at the ball. Look at this, and really come to a decision much quicker, we think. So I think it will not slow the game down. It'll take the times when we might have one that isn't exactly correct, take that out. I don't know that anybody's ever going to be perfect. And the second thing is, there are some tough gray area plays that as Rogers Redding, our national coordinator, says, that even bright football minds will disagree on. So you're never going to get rid of those plays, but we want to get them as many right as we possibly can, and I think this will help us.
Steve, I may have read this incorrectly or just maybe interpreted it a little bit wrong, but you're speaking of Rogers Redding, the NCAA coordinator of football officials. I'll just read you a quote. He's talking about that 3-yard rule, and he says, quote, "In other words, we're not going to allow some leeway where it's 3.5 or 4 yards. We'll give them that. We're going to be diligent about enforcing the rule as it is written." Let me just, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this. The way that I see that, the way that I've read that quote and sort of went back and looked at that press release, that you guys were letting some of those 3-yard rules slide a little bit as far as the ineligible lineman downfield. Am I reading that incorrectly?
Well, no, and so we've had great debate over this over the last couple years. Should we go back to the old rule where they could go 1 yard downfield, and so last year it almost passed the rules committee and wound up prop taking action on it. So really what we did, and this was a national change. So last year, early in the season, and I know you can probably, if you live in Tuscaloosa, you can probably think of a game early in the year that we may have had one on that our officials didn't get. But we were nationally struggling with this ineligible receiver downfield, and let me tell you why. The umpire, who is a guy kind of by the linebackers, defensive line, is primary to make this call, has been for years and years. And in the old days when we had dropbacks, sprint out passes, rollouts, it was still easy to officiate. But now with read options, you get quarterbacks that get on the corner and all of a sudden throw a pass. It's very difficult for the umpire to do it because what the rule says, and a lot of people may not know this, is it's where the offensive lineman is at the release point. It's not during the pass. You have to snapshot the field at the release point of the football, and where the linemen are at that release point is, how you officiate that. So the umpire, if a guy got out on the corner, umpire is looking at the interior block and there's a pass. He won't recognize it's a pass till it's mid-arc. And now he looks around, and if they're linemen downfield, he's got to figure out, well, when he released it, were they at 3? So we really struggle. So what the change in mechanics that we made was that we wanted especially when these quarterbacks get on the corner and make a late throw, we want the offside line of scrimmage official to help the umpire. And we actually gave them co-responsibility to make this call. And from, mid-season on, I think from an officiating perspective, we got much, much better. We weren't perfect, but we were much better on it. But the point of the rule and what Rogers was talking about is that because this is at release point, you have to be able to know where that guy was at release point. And if you as an official recognize it's a pass, but it's mid-arc, and the guy's 4 yards downfield, and you didn't really know where he was when it was released, we wouldn't flag that. Now, if he was 7 yards downfield, you could logically say he was downfield, we're going to penalize him. But so what the Rules Committee is talking to us to say is we're going to leave it at 3 yards, but we don't want it to be anything beyond that. Don't give a gray area benefit of the doubt. If they're beyond 3, it's a foul. And so we'll work on that this spring. But I think our new mechanic will help us dramatically in this area, and we got much better with it in the back half of the season.
Steve, when you look at this debate, and I don't know if you're at liberty to be able to discuss this, but you talked about those meetings in Destin. I could imagine with your role as the director of football officials for the Southeastern Conference, the coordinator of officials for the Southeastern Conference, when you're sitting in a meeting with all these coaches, you got offensive-minded guys and defensive-minded guys. We have debates right here on Talk Radio when we feature linebackers and defensive backs. They're like, it's unfair. That rule's unfair. You got offensive guys going, hey, man, we got to take advantage of it. Got to walk it right up to the chalk line. What's that meeting like, if you can discuss some of that liberty in those coaches' meetings, and you're sort of getting peppered from both sides, and you're trying to make it as fair as it could possibly be.
Well, and that's it. And first of all, when our 14 coaches are in the room together, it's always an exciting time. I mean, they're great personalities, but they all want, just their little advantage, and they're always working for that. But and they wouldn't be a great coach if they weren't doing that. But about this, we have great, lively debate. As I once said, so we actually a couple years ago in Destin, there was a big change in the blocking below the waist, and in my view and in their view, they kind of missed something out of that. So we were down there. It was early June, and they actually did a resolution to what had been left out was a component about blocking back toward the ball. What you and I had always known as crackback blocks, and that had kind of disappeared out of the rule. And the coaches were 14-0. You got to go get this fixed in the rule. And when our coaches kind of came out of there and did an official vote, 14-0, I got with my counterpart in the Big Ten. He got their guys teed up in their meeting. They did the same thing. And we were able, from June until start of the season, actually get the rule changed. We got the rules committee reconvened, and they added, you couldn't block below the waist back toward the original position of the ball. That's the power of these guys when they're 14-0, behind an issue. I would tell you the ineligible downfield is not going to be 14-0 ever, and so I think it's great debate. It's good discussion, and from an officiating perspective, we can work it either way. I think the rules committee has said, we want to leave it at 3, but we want to leave it at 3, not anything beyond that. We want you guys to make it a point of emphasis, and we'll do that. And we'll talk about it again in Destin, I'm sure, and we'll look at plays and video. But I think most of our coaches are getting to a good spot on this, and but that's not to say they're all going to love it. But I think we've gotten to a point where we can officiate it well now.
When we talk about rules and implementing rules, we know that the college football game is a little bit longer than the NFL game. And when you study injuries, fatigue, there's a correlation with fatigue and, length on the field, especially here in the Southeast when you've got 100-degree weather, sun beaming down on you. Is that a thin line that you have to look at? Because I know targeting, you talk about replays, you talk about more fouls or less fouls. Is that something that you look at as far as not making the game any longer? Is that a discussion that you guys have?
Well, it is a discussion point every year. The coaches are surveyed on that. And it's a great question because, I think, clearly sometimes our TV partners, maybe not even as much in the length of game, but the diversity of our games. You could have an Alabama-Arkansas game and it go, 3 hours, 2 minutes, and then Ole Miss Auburn, and it go 3 hours and 50 minutes, and it's the diversity in that. But some people say that's what makes our game great. The NFL, they kind of all look alike and all run the same offenses, and whereas in college football, I mean, you have the Georgia Techs of the world, with a different offense than some of the pro style, and then some of the read option, and so that's what makes the game great. What's never been articulated and really never. Tell me, and I'd love your opinion. What's too long? I mean, what is too long? What we have been working on, and especially around the fan experience, is there are components of the game. When you're in a media break, you want to be crisp in and out on that because fans are sitting in the stands waiting. So there's things around the game that we want to make crisp, but I think the rules committee have been very hesitant of late to make rule changes that would take plays out of the game because nobody seems to want plays out of the game. So, it's an interesting discussion. It's going to continue, and it's not just, how the rules are, but, there's some teams that run up tempo versus, huddle, and it just makes our game very diverse, but that may be a good thing. I will tell you, we get, on Monday mornings, you'd be shocked at how many calls we get from across our great fan base, but rarely do we get complaints that, I went to that Alabama-Auburn game and it was just too long. I was really mad about it. We don't ever get that complaint. So I know it's out there. It's something we talk about every year, Well, I'm not sure yet what the target number is, but I do want to hit one other thing, and you mentioned it around player safety. And in fact, a very interesting component this year. So I'm on the rules committee editorial subcommittee, so I don't get a vote, but I'm there to help write the rules and answer questions, show video on questions that the coaches and ADs have. But the meeting this year was in Orlando. Now, people would think we've always gone to Indianapolis, and February in Indianapolis is not the garden spot, but Orlando much better. But the reason the meeting was there is there was a health and safety summit there, really focused on concussions and concussion protocol. And so they had components that they wanted the rules committee to sit in on this. So health and safety of the players is every rule change we make has a lens to player safety. And in fact, you mentioned replay up front. There's a really a change in replay around targeting fouls. So really twofold. Number one is they really broadened authority for replay to look at targeting fouls. When every targeting foul that's called is reviewed by replay. That's set in the rule. But now the replay official gets more latitude. He can look at all aspects of the targeting foul, not just was there helmet contact, was it forcible, but was there an indicator of targeting action, a launch, or lowering the head with crown of the helmet, whether the opponent is defenseless, the location of the forcible contact. So they really get a broader aspect. And the idea there is we really only want to disqualify a player if it's a confirmed targeting foul. And so I think this will give replay broader authority to look at it to say, is it targeting? But in addition to that now, replay by rule will be able to create a targeting foul, and really only in egregious instances where there's a significant, they're not going to search the field for any ticky-tack hit or whatever. But if there's an egregious foul, an egregious targeting foul, now the replay official can stop the game and actually call that foul from the booth. And so those are really the changes around replay, around targeting. But, the lens stays around player safety. And I'm going to tell you, we've made great progress. The targeting rule, I know it's got a heavy penalty, but it's been a success in changing player behavior, and we need to stay there and not let up.
Well, we've got an attack on football as a whole. It's not just college, it's the NFL, and we've got to be able to talk about that. I think you and I have had this discussion before when you look at that, and it's good. It's good that we're having this debate and talking about it, but also we also look at football. It's a contact sport, and it's never going to be completely safe, but it's good to see rules, like you said, that are working, and we'll see where those conversations go. Got one more final question, Steve Shaw, right now. A ball carrier who slides feet first is treated as a defensive player. Now, if I'm understanding that's any player now?
Yeah, it's a ball carrier, so it doesn't mean only the quarterback, but usually it's only the quarterback. You don't see many, running backs, slide feet first. But what the rule is going to say that a ball carrier who has obviously given himself up and is sliding feet first becomes a defenseless player. And really what that does, the defenseless player becomes the moniker now that if a player is defenseless and then you make forcible contact, into the head or neck area, then it's a targeting foul. So even before, you could have a quarterback that slides, and if a guy hits him late, it was always a foul, but it was just a dead ball personal foul. Now, when he's given himself up and goes into the slide, then if he's hit in the head, it can be a targeting foul, which then carries the disqualification.
Steve, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you've got a lot of things going on right now. We appreciate you giving a couple of minutes of your time here in Tuscaloosa to explain these rules and to set, college football never stops in Tuscaloosa, and we've been having a lot of discussion. I thank you so much for clarifying a lot of these rules.
Well, it was my pleasure. Always good to be with you.